Great, everyone. I'm going to get started tonight. Thank you so much for taking time on a Tuesday night to talk about septic systems. So some of you may or may not know, it is Septic Smart Week, and I just noticed it says 2024 and we're in 2025. But the beautiful thing is it's the same week every year that we get together to talk about septic systems. And with that, I'm going to get started because between myself and Lucas, we have a lot of great information to cover tonight. So with that, I just want a little bit about the University of Minnesota, who is the lead kind of coordinator and sponsor of this training. Our program actually started in the mid-70s. So for a really long time, we've been educating and doing research about septic systems. So a bulk of our program is actually focused on training students, designers and engineers, installers and inspectors, service providers, maintainers, all of those people who touch septic systems and are professionals around septic systems. That's mainly what we do. But as I mentioned, we also do research, and the activity we're doing tonight, which is training the ultimate users, is about operation and maintenance, is a really critical aspect to make sure that systems don't just go in good, but are good for the life of their system. So thanks for being here again. We also have two great training sponsors, MAWA, which is the Minnesota Onsite Wastewater Association, which again is a trade organization that represents all of us, including myself and Lucas in this industry, and the PCA. And then our other big sponsor tonight is the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, whose primary responsibility is the rules and regulations around septic systems, but they also have a vested interest in having homeowners, property owners who understand what their systems are and how they work. So we're really happy to have them here. And both those groups are going to be help monitoring the chat for me tonight. So as we're going through these, and actually Lucas is on the current board of MAWA, and I'm going to let him introduce himself when he speaks. He's also going to be covering some of the content tonight. So really want to thank them for helping us make this event a success. So what are we going to cover tonight? So we have 10 main questions we're going to answer, and you're like, oh, these ones in yellow must be way more important. Those are to remind me and Lucas that Lucas is covering those topics, but we're going to spend the beginning part of this just talking about what septic systems are, and then we're going to get into maintenance and repairs, things you can do to extend the life of your system. And then the last few are questions we commonly get, which are topics around freezing and odors and well testing. So with that, the first one is what is a good, and most people just call them septic systems, but our regulations refer to them as subsurface sewage treatment systems, or SSTS. So this picture shows what is in some of our backyards, which is commonly called a drain field, a leach field, a conventional system. If you're really into the regulations, maybe a type 1 system. But it is often a gravity system, where the effluent goes from gravity out of the house, gravity into a septic tank, gravity into the drain field. So it still is the most common system installed across the US, and across Minnesota, still a very common system that is installed. So we're going to get in some of the details about what is a good SSTS. So a good septic system will not back up into your home. So there should never be wastewater in your basement. It should not surface in your yard or directly into a water body. The septic tank, which is kind of the first treatment step we're going to talk about, should be watertight, which means no ground or surface water leaking in and no sewage leaking out. They are designed to be watertight. And the last one, which we'll get into a little more, the hardest one to kind of see or sometimes understand, is that there has to be good treatment in the soil. And we define that is that it will be protecting groundwater. That is very important because our groundwater in Minnesota either moves laterally to a lake, river, or stream, or it goes deep and actually is recharging deep groundwater. So we want to make sure that water underneath our septic systems is clean by having the adequate vertical separation before we hit either a saturated zone, bedrock, or some sort of confining layer. And we'll, again, get into some more details about that coming up here. So I did first want to talk a little bit more about the septic tank. It's really where treatment starts. So the job of the septic tank is to catch solids that go down the drain. So some of these are big solids we might think about, and some of them are little. So in the process of catching those solids, it will start to decompose some of them. So if you've ever smelt a septic system, you smell actually the gases that are released when those organic solids are being digested. It will also store some solids that aren't able to be broken down. So what forms in the septic tank is three layers. Things that are lighter than water will float up. So we can think about soaps and greases, some a little bit of toilet paper. The sludge is the heavy stuff, right? It's going to settle to the bottom of that tank. And then finally, the layer in the middle is kind of the good stuff. It is the clarified layer of the tank. So it is much cleaner. As far as the amount of solids, not all of the solids accumulate because some of them are being broken down by the bacteria within the septic tank. So this shows what you might have in your backyard. If you look at the caption on the bottom here, it says in a modern septic tank. And that is important because not all tanks that are in people's backyards look like this, but they do all have some common features. The first thing you'll notice is on the left, right, is that there's an inlet coming in. That's generally going to be that pipe coming out of your house. And then an outlet on the way out that's pulling the effluent out of that clear zone. And kind of as we just described in the last slide, you see these three zones or layers that are going to form in that tank. With more modern systems, you will also notice what you see at the surface, which is some sort of access risers. They may be green like you see in this picture. They may be made of concrete. They can be, just different materials. And sometimes, particularly with some older systems, they may be buried, hopefully shallowly, because we are going to need to access this for maintenance. The other thing you'll notice at the end of this septic tank is an effluent screen. So some people have those and some people don't. That's why it's mentioned as optional. But if you do have one, it is another feature of your system that will need maintenance on a regular basis. The other thing that this image shows that we don't all have is a compartment wall in the middle. So sometimes you may not have that wall. Sometimes you might have several of these tanks in series. So, but in general, like I mentioned, they all kind of do the same function. The other thing to notice about this picture is that you see more sludge at the beginning of the tank. So whether you have a wall like you see here or a normal septic tank, in general, what we do see is that some of those bigger and heavier solids settle out towards the beginning of the tank. So I mentioned that effluent screening here, just a few real pictures to show you what they can look like in a tank. There's many different manufacturers or models. So they're called screens or effluent filters. They are becoming more common. They are, again, manufactured devices installed at the outlet of a septic tank, and they'll remove additional suspended solids that could be present that did not settle out adequately in the tank. So they're a great add-on to new systems and can even be retrofitted into existing systems. And I should note, you saw the questions we're going to be going over, but while I'm talking, if questions come to mind, definitely feel free to go into the Q&A section and add your question. If we're not planning to get to it tonight, someone might answer it before I even get to it. Otherwise, many of your questions we're hoping to get to over the course of this presentation. All right, so moving past the septic tank, most systems in Minnesota after the septic tank go to some sort of soil-based treatment. The picture you see here is one of those trenches like I showed in that first diagram. This one is using rock to spread out the wastewater in the trench. But where the magic happens, and I do really think, and I won't say it's magic, but it is science, what happens in the soil. And that is you take this still dirty wastewater, there's still solids and pathogens, you put it into the soil, and if it goes through enough unsaturated soil, the pathogens, the viruses, the phosphorus, those things are removed through biological, chemical, and physical treatment processes. The thing to note, though, is treatment has to happen. We have to remove those contaminants, but we also need to allow for water movement. So when the water goes into those soil pores, it needs somewhere to go, meaning the soil can't be saturated. So both from a treatment perspective and a water movement, we need soil pores that are not regularly saturated with water, which is going to be important coming up here. So when we have good soil, and the kind of soil we have on our properties in our backyard, we don't get to pick, But a good soil, and there's many different types that can treat sewage, will allow for natural biodegradation. And again, what we mean by that is microbes live in the soil. And when we put sewage out there, they come to eat up the food that's present in our wastewater. So that includes organic material and nutrients. This suitable soil will also cause the pathogens, the things that make us sick, to die off. It can convert nutrients into different forms. It can cause some of those nutrients and actually solids to bind with minerals. If we put the system in shallow enough, that soil will facilitate plant uptake of water and nutrients. And finally, that soil is going to allow for that water to move away from the system. So kind of as you can see in the picture, the soil can be pretty complex. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different particles, sand, silt, and clay particles. There's always a little bit of moisture present. There can be varying amounts of organic material, but the most important thing is that those pores have open space and that we have those naturally occurring microorganisms that are going to consume and help break down the contaminants in our wastewater. So when we put septic tank effluent out into the soil, it's kind of like a picnic where you don't invite the ants, they just come because they know there's food. That's what happens in the soil. So what you can see across the bottom of the trench on the left is what forms is a biologically active area of microorganisms that come because we're spreading that sewage out into the soil. This biomat is actually helpful. It actually slows things down a little bit. It provides time again for the soil to do its work. So again, what this might look like in your backyard is we start with the source or the home. So the wastewater, again, in this image is flowing gravity, and that's what most of our homes, it flows gravity. Sometimes you may have, for instance, a toilet or laundry in the basement that might need to be pumped up so our tanks don't get too deep. The other nice thing that this diagram shows is a clean out. A clean out outside your home is a great feature that allows that line to be cleaned if it ever needs to be without going into your home. Then you'll see the next component where we're going to start the treatment process in the septic tank. But where that final treatment really happens is out in the soil. So what you'll notice here is in order to put a system in the ground, you do need to have quite a bit of dry soil. So our separation requirement in Minnesota is that you have to have from the bottom of your system to your limiting condition, again, which would be a seasonally high or periodically saturated water table, bedrock, are our most common ones. That's where we're going to measure that from. So the question gets to be, well, what if you don't have that? So, for about half of our systems, give or take, in Minnesota, they don't naturally have 3 foot of separation. So on those sites, that's why we build mound systems. So what mound systems do is they bring in extra sand to achieve that treatment. You say, well, why do we use sand? Why are we moving sand around? Well, the nice thing about sand is if you pick it up from one spot and move it to another spot, it looks and acts the same. And we have a lot of data about how the sand that we use in mounds treats wastewater. So another thing that you'll see here in the diagram that is required with a mound system is a pump. So you may actually have a dosing chamber with a pump on a site that doesn't have a mound, and usually that's because of elevation differences, that to get to the area of your drain field, your trench system, you need a pump to help you with that. But with mound systems, they're always required because uniform distribution across that sand is required, because when you have a site that needs a mound, you have a pretty high water table. So we want to make sure that from day one, we are spreading that effluent out over that entire area, and a pump is the best way to do that. I'm actually currently designing a septic system that's going to go in my house, and it's going to have a pump in it. I think pumps are great. A lot of people don't like pumps because they think, oh, a pump's going to fail. Well, eventually everything fails, right? But pumps are really reliable. A good effluent pump, which is what we put in these tanks after a septic tank, doesn't have to deal with solids. And the other great thing is we put an alarm on them. So if there ever is a problem with that pump, we have an alarm and there's reserve capacity in that tank that allows us some time. The other thing you'll notice on the right there is that 3 foot separation now is measured still from the bottom of that distribution media, but now we elevated it. So it's basically like an elevated trench system that's sitting in that bed of sand. All right, so on to question number 2. So that was, again, what are good septic systems? The second one is really, how do septic systems protect our ground and surface water? So again, this is a neighborhood, and I think sometimes, and I don't know where you all live, but I think sometimes people, think septic systems are in the middle of a big farm. Well, certainly if you live on a farm, you have a septic system, but this shows a rural area where people have maybe 1 or 2 acre lots, maybe 3, 4 acre lots, right? So we can still see that we're in a somewhat rural area, but it's not necessarily in the middle of nowhere. So in these circumstances, again, septic systems are protecting ground and surface water. So I first just wanted to show this to describe again where we're using water. So when we bathe and launder our clothes, water dissolves the sweat and soil and rinses those compounds down the drain. When we flush the toilet, water is used to transport the byproducts of our metabolism out of the house. The primary objective of your SSTS is to remove the waste from the water. So surprisingly, when you see that pipe that says to SSTS, what's leaving in that pipe is 99% water. But we spend a lot of time focusing on that 1% to make sure that we remove those contaminants so that water is safe to use again. So when we think about how do we actually then think about sizing septic systems, we are looking at what is the maximum occupancy of your home, and we use bedrooms to determine that. So for most septic systems in Minnesota, we're going to assume 2 people per bedroom and normal wastewater usage, which results in a peak. And again, most of us are never going to use this much, but think about the day you have graduation, right? We want it, or you have all the family over for the holidays. The system has to work that peak day. So that's really what that number is about. So again, if you had a 3-bedroom home, that would mean we would size your septic system for 450 gallons per day. The note here is useful. We should always try to conserve water. And we'll talk about some options coming up about how to do that. So then thinking about how much wastewater your septic system has to deal with, if you're a typical household with just 1 person in it, that 1 person would use about 27,000 gallons of water a year. But if you look at the average house, which has 3 people in it, that's 58,000 gallons of water used per year, which is how much wastewater you make. And if you have a septic system in your backyard, I think it's pretty amazing that that septic system can effectively process that much wastewater every single year. And then think about the community you live in, or maybe think about your favorite lake or stream near where you live, and there's 250 homes around it that have septic systems. That equates to 14.5 million gallons per year. So having good septic systems is a very important part of protecting Minnesota's both ground and surface waters. So what do we add to the water? And so once we use that water is when it becomes sewage or wastewater. And you'll see there's kind of 2 sources in the image on the right. Our toilet and kitchen have the heaviest loads. It's due to, again, our human waste along with food waste. And often those 2 sources are referred to as black water, where the water from bathing and laundry has a lower load, but you can see it still has things we certainly want to treat before that water is ready to be reused. And so those are commonly referred to as gray water. So we're going to walk through in the next set of slides talking about how septic systems effectively deal with pathogens, solids, nutrients, and finally, those chemicals, cleaners, and medicines that we use within our homes. So first, looking at pathogens. So these, again, are the things that make us sick. So viruses, bacteria, worm, and harmful protozoa. Keep in mind, most bacteria in nature are not harmful, but we're really focused on that some of them are, and that we need to effectively treat those so we don't make other people sick. So how we generally deal with these in our septic systems is these bacteria and viruses came from inside our bodies. And we are aerobic organisms. We have to breathe oxygen in through our nose. But these microbes that live in our body are actually anaerobes. And the primary way that they get into septic systems is through our guts, which are actually anaerobic. So when they get out to the septic tank, they are not deactivated. They do not effectively die off in the septic tank. But when they get out to the soil actually has pores that are filled with oxygen, and we call that an aerobic environment. So that's one of the key reasons why we have 3 feet of unsaturated soil is to make sure that these pathogens are actually killed off, are stuck in the soil, are deactivated, so they can't make people sick in the future. And again, that's an example of a harmful guy there on the right. So moving on to organic solids. So this picture kind of tells the story, right? So this is one of those effluent screens I talked about that was catching a lot of solids. So if I see a screen like this, and I can tell I took this picture because that's my sampling pump in the background, it was a screen that really needed to be serviced. And this was actually a septic tank that had gone too long without being cleaned. So the screen was catching all these excess solids. And some of them are organic. So that's what this slide is about. Organic solids are digested and undigested animal and vegetable material. They can also come from synthetic or artificial organic compounds. So if these solids, and they're not always as obvious as you see in the picture, but if these solids would make it to a water body, they are going to take oxygen out of that water body to break them down. And we can quantify how much organic material is present in a sample by measuring the BOD, or the biochemical oxygen demand. So how we deal with these in septic tanks is some of them, again, are going to settle out and be removed when the tank is pumped. An effluent screen or filter, like you see here in the picture, is going to limit some of those solids passing out. But generally speaking, this organic material is going to be eaten by the soil microbes. So I mentioned that viruses and bacteria need 3 feet, but actually to remove organic solids, those are relatively quickly digested in the first foot underneath our soil-based treatment systems. So inorganic solids can come from fibers, from synthetic clothing, minerals, metals, and salts. So these are unfortunately not able to be broken down by the good bacteria in our system. If they persist in our water, they can cause the clouding of water. And there is also the risk that some of these solids could cause our soil pores to plug. So again, the goal here is that these do settle out in the septic tank. Our screen helps with this as well. If they make it out to the soil again, they're going to be relatively quickly removed, but unfortunately, they can cause that biomat to be limiting. And what I mean by that is that the water may not be able to pass through quickly enough. And this is not something that happens in a year, but over the life of the system, some of those organic solids can build up on that interface that is that biomat. So moving on to phosphorus. So as you can see here on the picture on the right, that is the lake or pond that no one wants to swim in, right? When they look green like that. So it is a nutrient, and in this case, it's feeding a growth of algae in that water body. So where it comes from is primarily us. So we consume food that has phosphorus in it. We don't need that phosphorus, so we excrete it. It's also present in food if you're putting undigested food like down your drain. And it's still in a few household detergents. So not laundry soap anymore, but there can be some dishwashing detergents and other soaps that contain phosphoric acid. So kind of as I highlighted, in our freshwaters in Minnesota, the growth of weed and algae is based on how much phosphorus inputs there are to that water body. So anything we can do to reduce the amount of phosphorus is going to be positive. So how we deal with this in septic system is phosphorus binds with the soil. So here's a case again where we want that 3 feet of soil treatment because that maximizes the amount of phosphorus removing capacity we have. The ultimate amount of phosphorus that a septic system can remove is soil dependent. So it's based on your soil type, your mineralogy, your separation. But most septic systems in Minnesota, and I can't say all, but most septic systems, the phosphorus removing capacity will be the length of the septic systems. but it could be in the future in unique soil environments, we may need to look at advanced phosphorus treatment. So our last nutrient that we're going to focus on tonight is nitrogen. So same kind of source is that we consume excess nitrogen. So we release that nitrogen in primarily in our urine. It can also be present in undigested food. It is in a few household cleaners and chemicals. So anything that has ammonia as an ingredient, ammonia is a form of nitrogen. So here we have two potential impacts, but the biggest impact here in Minnesota and the Midwest is drinking water quality. So there is a public health limit of 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate. So we need to make sure that we are below that 10 before, again, that water is going to be used by someone for a drinking water supply. So as far as how we deal with it is not all septic systems are the same. So it really depends on the design of the septic system, how much nitrogen it will remove. This is one of the number one reasons why there's a setback from our soil treatment system to the well is to allow for some dilution. But there are systems and environments that may need advanced treatment to ensure that we're below that 10 milligram per liter standard before we reach a down gradient well from our systems. All right, so the last one that I could spend most of my time talking about, but we don't have that much time tonight, is all the other stuff. So the cleaners, the medications, the over-the-counter medications. So sometimes these are generically referred to as contaminants of emerging concern. And as someone who does research, this is an area that we're interested in getting more data on. Because ultimately we know in large amounts they can harm septic systems. So the unfortunate thing, and this one shows, for instance, toilet bowl cleaner. Most toilet bowl cleaners are pretty nasty chemicals. They will kill lots of things. Or if you even think about a medication that many of us have taken over our lives, an antibiotic kills bacteria and it doesn't know who the good bacteria and the bad are. So with septic systems, one of our challenges is we don't have the benefit of dilution, right? We have one, two, three, four people maybe hooked up to a septic system. Where in the city, when you're connected, we have many people who are, kind of diluting out those different uses. So that is really where the most common issues come up with septic systems. As far as other impacts, if these are not fully removed, which is common both with septic systems and municipal wastewater treatment plants, is that most of our wastewater treatment processes were not designed to remove all of these emerging contaminants. There's research showing it can affect aquatic food chains, species reproduction, and can even show up in our drinking water. So how we deal with these in septic systems is some of them may be stored, some of them may impact in high amounts septic system performance. There is increasing amount of data showing that many of these things are actually removed in a soil-based treatment system, but it is not bulletproof. It is not 100% removing everything we're putting down the drain. So with that, that's kind of our overview. We're going to move on to what management is needed. So I'm going to stop sharing here and let Lucas take this section.
Awesome. Well, I'll start sharing here quick.
You should introduce yourself too, Lucas.
Yeah. So yeah, my name's Lucas. I'm on the MALWA board, so I'm the board member for the service provider seat, so kind of the people who deal with the advanced systems that Sarah touched on a little bit. And then I also work for Septic Check. We kind of do have touch at kind of every asset of like the on-site world. So I was asked to kind of come here and help present with Sarah today, and super excited to be able to do it, and hopefully I can give you guys some good information. So, as Sarah said, we're going to be talking a little bit about the management. So, basically, if you have an existing septic system and kind of some good tips and tricks and things about taking good care of your system. Um, so, this right here is a really cool video we have. So, it's basically showing a septic tank starting from empty. So, this would be like either right after an install or right after it was pumped. and then showing it kind of filling up over the time of its life back to where it needs to be properly serviced again. So I can play right here, and then so you can kind of see coming in through that inlet baffle Sarah was talking about, stuff's flowing in and slowly filling up that tank. It's all kind of, again, more full at the beginning of the tank because the sludge will kind of just pile up as it goes in. I think one cool thing that this really shows, and really any of these pictures of tanks like this, is that the importance of the maintenance truly is that as the septic tank fills up, you're actually getting less treatment out of the septic tank. Um, as the as the tank fills up, as you can see, it kind of starts to creep into that clear zone. So the scum's getting thicker, the sludge is getting thicker, and then as that kind of collapses on itself, there's less detention time inside the tank. So the detention time, if you're flushing a bunch of stuff or you have a bunch of people over, the water's going to flow through the septic tank faster and won't allow for as much settling as it would a tank that isn't as full. So it's kind of a really cool graphic we have showing it going in and out and the importance behind actually getting your septic tank pumped and cleaned properly. Step one we have is understanding what you actually have for a septic system. So, do you have one tank? Do you have several tanks? Do you have an effluent filter? Do you have a pump? Do you have an alarm? So those things are going to be things that are going to help you, one, understand what kind of maintenance you need to do. You know, if you do have a pump tank, if you do have an effluent filter, you may need to service more often than if you just have a standard system. If you have an existing system and then something was built or added to it, and maybe people didn't know, and there's more use going into the system than it's designed for, you may need more often service, or again, as systems are designed per the bedrooms and the amount of people that could be in the home. If you have more than that staying in the home or living in the home, then your system may need more maintenance, or more frequent maintenance just due to how fast you're going to fill up that tank and how fast you're going to lose that clear zone. Um, Also, like Sarah was talking about with the pumps are super good. They do a really good job. If you get a good one, they do last a really long time. But you want to make sure that you have a working and good alarm, because if it does go bad and you don't know about it, that obviously is going to create a lot of headaches for you, and it's not a very fun time. And if you don't have that alarm set properly, even the reserve capacity, if it's not set right, then that's going to create all sorts of issues too. So you really want to make sure you get a good maintainer, someone who's going to take care of your system, look it over and make sure that those things are properly set. I think it's also a super good idea to be able to have your design, be able to review your design, and kind of even just know where your system's located. There's a lot of people who, especially if they have an older system, their tanks are buried, they don't even know where it is in their yard. Um, Even if they know where their tank is, maybe they don't know where their drain field is. They just think it's somewhere over in that direction. Um, it's really good to know where these things are, because you want to make sure that you're, one, properly taking care of them. You're not allowing trees to grow into the drain field. You're not driving over them or parking stuff on top of them or building things on top of them. You want to make sure that you're treating that as well as you can. If you don't have your design for your septic system or an as-built for it, it's very possible that the county should have it on record. Some of the counties even have access to them on like an online GIS where you can just look up your parcel ID or your address and you can find them all on your own without having to contact anyone. Um, but if you don't have your hands on one of those, it's definitely a really good idea to try and get your hands on one. And then at least you can see, you might even be able to give you a hint to what size tank you actually have in the ground, or if you have more than one, because there's also been a ton of times we've experienced it where you have one tank with access to grade, whether it's an inspection pipe or a manhole cover, and then there's another tank buried after it that no one even ever knew about because they buried it when they put it in, and no one ever went back to it after that. Um, Another tip is if you know who installed it, or someone who's pumped it or maintained the system before, you might be able to ask them. Previous pumping records might show how many gallons they pumped out of your tank, which would then in return tell you how many gallons the capacity of your tank, or the installer. Sometimes there's a lot of people who keep those records around, and or they might remember installing your system back in the day, and it might be able to help you as well. So risk with septic systems. So obviously septic systems, it's usually not something you would think most people want to play in. But it really does surprise me a lot of the times, especially being around younger kids. It seems like if there's ever an outdoor event or kids are running around in the backyard, the first place they go is those green plastic lids. And whether they're just kind of playing leapfrog over them or playing around them, you want to make sure that your septic system is, lids are properly secured, everything's in good condition, and that it's safe for kids to be running around. Not only that, there's gases that are produced by them. Hydrogen sulfide and methane gases are super common in wastewater. Um, so if the tank lid has an opening or people are getting into them, looking into them themselves, it's a super dangerous environment to actually be in without the proper safety equipment. And we want to make sure, obviously, that people aren't getting harmed just because they're trying to look at their septic system or fix something on their own or get in a tank when they shouldn't be doing it. Um, Wastewater also obviously contains pathogens, so those are disease-causing organisms that are going to make you sick. So, if you are ever in contact with wastewater, we obviously want to try to avoid it because you don't want to take that extra risk of getting sick. Um, and going back to kind of the kids part with it, kids, pets, adults, there's a lot of water in septic tanks. They're actually a lot deeper than some people think. Um, and it would be super easy, especially for small children. And, sadly, you do hear stories of it. There's sometimes a couple every year of tragic events where a child or pet, dog, whatever it is, does fall into a septic tank. And, hopefully sometimes they get them out. Sometimes, sadly, they're not able to. Um, so you really want to make sure that it's as safe as possible. The other thing is making sure, and this kind of even goes back to knowing where your septic system is and what you actually have, but you should never be driving over a septic tank, especially, or a drain field. The drain field more is to cause damage to your actual drain field. The tank, um, is more for your own safety. I mean, it can cause damage to the tank as well, obviously, but they're not made to be driven over by a regular vehicle. If you drive over them, they definitely have a risk of collapsing, and then that obviously is a big safety risk because you don't want to fall into one of those. So being able to know where they are, being able to stay away from them, try to keep people away from them. They're not toys. I know they do cost a lot of money, but probably not something you want to be using as a playground. Some safety, some rules to protect you and your family. Um, so never enter your septic tank. Again, like we talked about, there's lots of hazardous gases, there's pathogens, there's obviously wastewater. I don't think most people are looking to enter their own septic tank, but even if there are, you're trying to save money and enter it on your own. If you have an issue that needs to be fixed that someone pointed out to you, it's never a safe thing to do unless you have the proper training and the proper equipment. Um, Again, kind of going back to even the kids thing, there's lots of professionals who go in tanks every year who sadly, aren't using the proper equipment or the equipment wasn't calibrated properly. And people end up losing their lives every year from entering confined spaces, especially in relation to wastewater. Um, and it's a super dangerous environment. We want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Try not to have open flames near a septic system, smoking, using torches, that kind of stuff. Anything that's going to have a spark. Um, Again, those gases that are off gassing off wastewater, definitely not something to play around with, and um, you don't want to have an explosion due to smoking or to using a torch near it. Um, if there's wastewater that's surfacing, you want to make sure that's something you fix right away. Um, that leads more to like the pathogen side of everything. If there's just water, big puddle, mud pile on the ground is what it might look like to some people. Your dog might be playing it. Then your dog may track that in the house, or the kids might go over and play with it. So if there is ever anything noticed where it could be wastewater in the ground, you want to get a trained professional out there as soon as you can to take a look at it, verify that is what it is, and figure out what the best fix is going to be for this issue. Because it's absolutely not something you want to do. It's not a dig a trench into the woods type of thing, like some of the old guys used to say. It's something that needs to be corrected right away, and you don't want anyone to be playing in it. Um, you want to be careful with your use of electric tools near water or near your septic system in general. Again, those gases, most of those electrical tools, they're creating little sparks when you're using them. Um, So that has the possibility if the gases are high enough that they could cause an explosion, or could cause a fire. So nothing that you want to do. Got to be making sure you're taking the proper safety procedures anytime you're going to be near any of that stuff. Um, Keeping vehicles and other heavy equipment off of your septic system. So again, the fact of driving a truck or a vehicle over your septic tank absolutely could cause it to collapse. And then also, even if it doesn't, it could cause severe damage to the septic tank, to the drain field, to your collection line coming from your house to your septic tank. If it's in the winter, you're going to be pushing frost down more towards it, which could either cause more damage or cause freezing issues. It's basically just easier to stay away from it as much as you can, because you don't want to risk causing any more damage. And then assure that all lids are secured in place to prevent entry at all times. You want to make sure that those lids are on because, again, in my experience, the kids are always going to be a magnet towards it, which isn't preferred, but it's really hard to stop kids. And so the best thing we can do is at least make sure that the lids are on there secured. If they're plastic, making sure that there's all the screws are in them and they're properly mounted in the riser. If they're concrete, making sure that the concrete lids are in good condition, they're not cracked, they're not too damaged to where they're gonna support the weight of whoever's gonna stand on them. Because the last thing you want to do is to have a kid jumping on it or playing on it or a person and falling in the tank. So here's a little video from the EPA on maintenance.
And 1 in 5 households in the United States depend on septic systems to treat their wastewater. A properly maintained septic system safeguards your family's health, protects the environment, and can save you thousands of dollars on repairs. What can I do to protect my system? Quick tip number 5. Protect it and inspect it. Residential septic systems should be regularly inspected by a service provider.
Hi, I'm Mike. I inspect septic systems throughout Northern Virginia. A typical septic tank inspection includes measuring the scum thickness or grease at the top of the tank, as well as the solids that accumulate on the bottom. This will help us to determine how well sewage flows through the tank and how often it needs to be pumped. Your local service providers can also inspect for leaks or other potential issues as well. To determine how often your system should be inspected, consider these factors: your system type and size, the size of your household, and the amount of water you use. While many houses have conventional gravity systems that typically need to be inspected every 1 to 3 years, those with advanced treatment systems or electrical components, such as pumps, should be inspected annually at a minimum. An inspection today can prevent a costly repair tomorrow.
So do your part to be septic smart. Contact your service provider to learn how often your system should be checked. Inspecting your septic system regularly can save you money and protect you and your family's health.
So kind of a cool thing with that video he was showing right there, what he's using is called a sludge judge. So he was actually checking how much solids were built up inside the septic tank. So he was measuring mainly for the sludge. He went through the baffle. So there's the fats, oils, and greases, which are floating on the top, and then you have your clear zone, and then the sludge on the bottom. So because he went through the baffle, he wasn't really getting in those fats, oils, or greases. But he was measuring how much sludge was, and then so that's kind of what we use to judge to depend on if a septic tank is ready for pumping. So if you sludge judge a tank, and then if it's at or above that 25% of the total tank depth, then that tank needs to be pumped. That is over the tank's capacity. Um, so that's kind of the tool we use. And then you kind of touched on some of the advanced treatment and the pumps, just stating that those systems might need more service than just your standard trench system, or type 1 system like Sarah was talking about.
In 1 in 5 households in the
Um, So here we're going to talk a little bit about inspection versus maintenance and kind of what it means in Minnesota. So in Minnesota, inspection usually means more by like a compliance inspection. So if you're building something on a home or if there's a sale of the home, they do a little bit deeper than kind of just maintenance. Um, so they'll value your system to make sure that it's meeting the state code, so that it's not backing up, there's no surfacing, that the tanks are watertight and structurally sound. And then they will also check the the separation in the soil. So they'll do a soil pit and make sure that there is 3 feet of separation from where your wastewater is being applied to where the seasonally saturated groundwater table is, or the limiting condition. Um, to do that, they do have to pump the septic tank. So they'll pump the septic tank and they do a tank, excuse me, do a tank integrity on it. So they'll make sure there's no cracks in the tank, make sure the tank's in good conditions. Um, if there's something that doesn't pass on your when you do a compliance inspection, so let's say if there's a crack in the tank, that would be a fail. You would have to do something, most likely replacing the tank to be able to get that passing compliance. Or same thing if your drain field doesn't meet the separation, you're going to have to do something in order to be able to have that certification of compliance. Because we want to make sure that the systems are functioning properly. If you're selling a home, we want to make sure that the person that's buying the home knows what they're getting into and has a working septic system, so that we're doing everything we can to protect, our families, our drinking water, and nature. So maintenance in Minnesota is servicing your septic system with no regulation triggers and no evaluation separation. So that would just be either someone coming out and just doing an inspection. So they'd be doing a sludge judge. They would be checking out your pump, checking out the float if you have one, checking out floats, panels, visual conditions of everything. So checking out lids, risers, anything you can visually see from grade. They're not usually going to dig into anything and actually physically measure and check things to make sure they're working properly. During normal maintenance, if it's a pumping event, sometimes some service providers will do the full tank integrity form, so they will inspect the tank for cracks or corrosion and that kind of stuff. But not always. There is some pumpers who just come and suck and clean out the tank. Um, but even if they're during during a pumping event, if you do pump the tank and you do find a crack, or you do find that the tank is starting to collapse due to corrosion or anything like that, there is really nothing that's going to trigger that necessarily on the regulator side. Um, Obviously, hopefully the company that you have out pumping for you will let you know, so that hopefully you can do something about it to prevent that before it becomes a bigger issue for you. But usually there's not going to be any like county enforcement or local government enforcement if something is just found during a normal maintenance event. So septic tank maintenance, usually it's depending on usage, 1 to 3 years. The septic tank should be evaluated. So basically to figure out if you need to pump, and if you do need to be pumped, you want to make sure that you're pumped by a certified maintainer pumper. Um, the interval really depends on the size of the tank and then how you use it. So again, like I talked about a little bit earlier as well, if you have a 3-bedroom home, but if you have 10 people living in it, you're going to have to service that more than someone who has a 3-bedroom home and only one person's living in it, or 2 people are living in it, most likely at least. Um, it all depends on how much water you're using, how much stuff you're flushing down the drain. I've seen some people who can go a really long time without technically having the need based off the percentage wise to pump. And there's some people that are able to fill up a septic tank in 6 months or a year, and they're using it a lot. They're really pushing their system, and they need to pump it much more often. Um, so you want to make sure that if you're not pumping your septic tank, you're at least getting it inspected by someone. So like using that sludge judge to let you know if your tank is due for pumping or not. And removing solids, you want to make sure that you're doing that when you need to, because you don't want to have an not, you don't want to have too much going out to your soil treatment area. If you don't pump your septic tank, eventually those solids are going to go somewhere. So if you have a pump, let's say if you have a mound system with a pump, they're just going to move itself slowly over to that pump tank, and then soon your effluent pump's going to be pumping solids out to your drain field. Or if you have a gravity system, they're going to work their way through the tank, or if there's just one tank, they'll work their way up to where they're going to start flowing out to your drain field. It's going to start causing excessive biomat in your drain field, and it's just going to cause all sorts of issues that are a lot more expensive than just getting it pumped or inspected on a fairly often basis. And eventually, if that goes on long enough, if you think you don't have to pump your system or you don't have it pumped, and you have those solids and they build up in the drain field, and then it starts restricting the flow of water through it, and then your system will slowly back up, and then at some point, you very well may have water backing up in your house or just spilling out the top of your tank. And then again, you're faced with a much higher repair bill at that point, um, if you're lucky enough to be able to fix it, than just doing your normal maintenance on the system. So here's another video, just kind of like demonstrating someone pumping and cleaning a tank. Play that quick.
Most residential septic tanks should be pumped every 3 to 5 years. Some types of specialized or advanced treatment systems may require more frequent pumping and other maintenance.
Hi, I'm Robert, septic pumper in Northern Virginia. Your septic tank contains 3 substances: effluent, scum, and sludge. Over time, scum or grease accumulates on the top level, while sludge or solids sit on the bottom. During a scheduled pump out, the operator uses a vacuum line to remove the buildup. The effluent or untreated wastewater travels from your drains to filters that separate the scum and the sludge. These filters should be taken out and cleaned during the pump out service. Follow recommendations from your service provider and local health department.
So do your part to be septic smart. To keep your system working in top condition, schedule to pump out your septic tank at appropriate regular intervals, and keep your maintenance records in a handy place so you know your system's service history.
So that was just a quick little video of what an actual septic pumping looks like. It also showed him cleaning off the effluent filter back into the septic tank. Another really vital point, especially if you have an effluent filter on your system. So we'll go to the next one. So I know I've probably mentioned it a couple times already, but so septic tank cleaning or septic tank pumping is needed when there's more than 25% of the total liquid depth of the tank is met, from storing sludge or scum. So if your tank is, as soon as it gets kind of close or above that 25%, you want to make sure that you're getting the tank pumped. Another big thing with pumping and making sure that you're choosing a good maintainer or pumper is that when the tank is being cleaned, you want to get as much of that sludge and scum out of there as possible and get the most for your money. So it's very important to make sure that your pumper is back flushing or stirring the tank. There's multiple different ways and technologies that they have to kind of mix up the tank and create more of like a slurry than just kind of sucking it down. So you want to make sure that they're doing that. If it is back flushing, if the tank's really nasty, sometimes you have to use both techniques, or sometimes you have to back flush multiple times. It's more than just coming up with like a shop vac on a truck and sticking a hose in there and sucking it all out. You do have to be paying attention. You do want to make sure that you're getting as much of those solids out and cleaning things up as much as you can. That being said, like obviously not every drop of water, not every piece of sludge gets taken out of there. But you do want to at least get as much of the big stuff as you can and try and get that tank in the best condition, for that customer. So in Minnesota, you want to make sure we technically have to pump out of a large manhole, so at least 20 inches. And it's also the best way to be able to actually make sure you're cleaning the tank properly. A lot of old systems have 4 6-inch inspection ports that are up to grade. It's just a way they used to do it. They'd bury lids and just bring those up. They're a lot smaller for people, easier to mow around. But you're not able to actually fully get in there and do the job properly. Like when I talked about the back flushing or the stirring of the tank, that's almost impossible to do properly and know that you did a good job through an inspection, just a 4 or 6-inch inspection port, just because you can't really see what's going on, one, and two, there's not enough room to be able to get all those tools in there to be able to actually do that the proper way. So sometimes you have to dig up the lids to be able to pump the tank properly. Sometimes you have to actually add the lids. You have to go down to the tank, and there was never any riser or anything put on, so you have to pop the lids off. It's a lot harder to do after the fact. So it's definitely recommended that when a system's installed, that all the lids are put to grade. And again, those 4 and 6-inch inspection ports should not be used, just because we're not able to see what we're doing and we're not able to do as good of a job cleaning. So this is a little picture on the cleaning effluent filters. So the best way to do it is just to, have access to water, whether it's a hose on the house or some of the pump trucks actually have water on them as well. So you want to make sure that you're just spraying that back right off into the septic tank itself. A big thing with this is that if you are cleaning an effluent filter, you want to make sure you're cleaning it off in the septic tank. You don't really want to clean it over the same lid that you pulled the filter out of if you can, because there's a high chance that some of that's just going to go right into the basket that the filter actually sits in and then flow right onto your pump tank. And then I've also seen some times where people are just, they're trying to clean it in a tank and they'll clean it in the pump tank as well. I mean, again, it's probably not the end of the world, but we're trying to keep solids out of the pump tank, away from the pump, away from your drain field as much as possible. So if you can bring it back to your first lid, your first septic tank, and clean it there, that's definitely the preferred best way to do it. Another big thing with effluent filters is the interval of cleaning them. It depends on obviously your usage on the system again. A lot of times we end up going back to that. So if you have a lot of people living in the house, if you're flushing a lot of stuff, if your tank hasn't been pumped in a while, that effluent filter may clog up a lot faster than, 3 or 5 years that it takes you to fill up your system. So it's definitely something as a homeowner you want to be aware of. You want to know it's there. You want to know how to be able to clean it or who to call to be able to clean it um, if you ever have to. Um, because if the effluent filter, if they get plugged to a certain extent, they can absolutely cause a backup in your home too. I've seen it plenty of times where a plugged effluent filter isn't letting any water pass through and that tank backs up just as if you did have a failed drain field or a frozen pipe, and it will back up into the home. And obviously, again, no one wants that. So if it's something that you need someone to come up more often to do, you just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Another big thing is they do offer, you don't see it as much on residential systems, but they do offer alarms for effluent filters. So basically, it's a little or some of the brands offer alarms. So if it's a little um, inline float, basically, that can screw into the filter, and then if that filter ever does become plugged, it'll lift that float, just like the float that you would have on a pump and a mound system, to let you know that filter is plugged, the level's starting to rise, and at least gives you time to call out a professional to come and clean it and take a look at it. So this one's going to talk about a report that you get after you have a septic tank cleaning or pumping. Um, so the service provider, the pumper, whoever you have out there doing that service for you, they should provide you a report, including the amount of sludge and scum before they pump the tank. So this is actually a super important metric for you as the homeowner to get, because then like, hey, did I wait too long? Am I doing this too soon? Can I wait a little bit longer? Am I right in the sweet spot? And obviously these things are ever changing. If you have kids going to college or people moving in, moving out, or more parties, people coming over, but it at least gives you a general idea of, hey, am I doing a good job? Are we on the right track? Or do we need to either increase this, or do we think we might be able to dial this back some? Um, you want them to give you a little bit of report on the tank. So see if a big part of looking at inspecting the tanks is even looking at the risers, make sure that so the access that brings the lid up to grade, making sure that there's not infiltration getting in around there. Have them let you know if they saw anything leaking in the tank itself. We want to do our best to keep groundwater out of these systems, because any extra water going to your soil treatment area is just going to reduce the life and reduce the amount of water that it's going to take. So we want to keep all of that away that we can. We want them to note if there's any safety concerns with tank access. So that would be if you have a lid and there's a crack in the lid, or it's starting to dry rot, or the concrete's starting to get corroded and it's starting to not be as safe. You want to make sure they are at least looking at that, documenting it, letting you know if there's anything you need to do. And then if there are if they do find anything wrong, being able to help you troubleshoot it, let you know what repairs are needed. Um, you know, when someone is out there pumping, they should be giving the system a full overlook. Sometimes I know when we do pumping, we try to look at the drain field, we look at the pump, the panel, the tank, pretty much everything while you're there. You might as well inspect it, and be able to give everyone a good report on their performance and how their system is functioning currently. If you are not given a report from your pumper or service provider, then you should see if you can request one because they might have one, just might not have given it to you. Record keeping. So some areas in Minnesota also require that a report is submitted after a service is provided on the home for even a standard system. So you want to make sure that I think no matter what, it's always a good idea to be able to have those, just to be able to show the history of your system. So any of those reports that you're able to get from your pumper, just always keep those. Again, if you're in an area, either you might have to submit them, your pumper might submit them for you. But it's definitely a good idea to keep, the design, pumping reports, any repairs that you've done. It's good if you do have to do some repairs. So let's say if you have a mount system and a pump, it's a good idea to kind of keep track of when you did that pump or what you replaced, just so you kind of know the life of it too. Um, it's also helpful when you go to sell your property or if you're having any issues, it might be helpful for the technician to be able to see what pump you bought last time without even having to pull it, or see when things were replaced and when things went bad last. So now we're moving on to our next topic is number 4. And do I need to add an additive to my septic system? So septic additives, I guess the easiest way to say it is they're not really needed. Um, sep Septic additives to date have no third-party research to support their effectiveness. I know on the commercials and on the back of the bottle, they say that they are going to be super helpful and save you a bunch of money on pumping. But they're not starters. They're not helping the bacteria. They're not cleaning the septic tank. Um, there isn't really an additive that I've ever seen work. There isn't. I know Sarah's done a bunch of tests with them. I know that we've had a ton of customers who have come to us over the years and have talked about septic additives and what they've done and how well they've worked. And so far, I haven't seen one that has actually helped the system. Um, there's already bacteria in wastewater. You don't need to add anything to start. You don't need to do an expired gallon of milk or any of the old wives' tales. Everything that's in your septic tank, everything that you're flushing down the drain is going to be more than sufficient enough to get that bacteria started after a septic system is pumped. Um, and that's kind of the same thing of even with the feeding in the system. Wastewater has a lot of food in it already. It has everything that the bacteria need to be able to thrive. So you shouldn't need to add anything to it to jumpstart that or make it work more efficiently. And then as far as the cleaning on the septic tank, MPCA regulations ban the use of these products in septic systems in Minnesota as they move solids out of the septic tank that should be settling out. So based off all of the data that I've seen, when they say that they're cleaning the septic tank or getting rid of the sludge, what really is happening is there's the chemicals that they're adding are helping that sludge float and rise up and then actually go out to your drain field. It's not just disappearing. Um, it's it's getting into places where you don't want it, you just can't see it. And then number 5, how do I hire a septic system professional and or make repairs? So when you are out there looking for someone to help with your septic system, a big thing is word of mouth, talking to your neighbors, talking to your family members, seeing who they've used, seeing who they have good experience with. If you're new to an area and you don't know anyone or don't have any family in the area, usually you can go to like a county website or a city website, or even the MPCA website, and usually they'll have a list of certified individuals in the area for whatever service you're looking for. So if you're looking for a pumper, you're able to, you can either ask the county or find on their website and find someone who's licensed in that area. They should be able to point you in the direction, at least give you a couple ideas of where to go. Also, if you just Google MPCA SSTS license search, and then you can select your counties and nearby, and you should be able to find anyone who's licensed in the area and kind of call around and see. And then the other part is trying to figure out, what do you actually need? So a maintainer in Minnesota is someone who cleans the tanks and makes minor repairs. So that would be pumping the tanks. That would be possibly replacing pumps or possibly replacing floats. An installer, that's someone who's going to be able to make repairs and then also install new systems. So, they might be able to do a little bit bigger repairs too, such as like replacing tanks, fixing risers. If there's an issue with your collection line itself, you'd want to be looking for an installer. Designers, so designers in Minnesota are going to design new systems, or if you have to do like a major modification to existing systems. So an example of that, obviously a new system, pretty basic there. But if you're doing like a major modification, so if you had a compliance inspection done and you need to do a new drain field because it didn't meet separation, you're going to have to talk to a designer that's going to be able to help provide input and figure out, where this drain field is going to go, what exactly you need to do to be able to have a drain field that's going to be within compliance, and then within code. An inspector, so there's someone who's going to inspect new systems and existing systems. So that's something that you're going to need. Let's say if you're going to sell a house, you're going to need to have an inspection done on your system. Um, they're going to look at the separation. They're going to do the tank integrity forms. They're going to make sure the alarm's working if you have a pump. Make sure the panel's functioning properly. They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to give you that certificate of compliance that is going to allow you to be able to, whether it's add on to your home or sell your home, they'd also be able to give you a good idea of the condition that your system's in. And then service provider, they're ones who can evaluate septic systems that are larger or that have technology on them. So some of I think they mentioned ATU or advanced technology. If you have anything with a blower aeration added, service providers can be willing to help. They'd also be a good option too if you don't want to do the pumping every year, but if you want to have just a normal inspection done on the system to make sure your pump, the floats, alarms, all that stuff's working, they're another one that might be able to help with that. And then a note is just intermediate or advanced designers and inspectors may be needed for systems that have some of those ATUs on them, or if it's for a commercial property that's a little bit larger than just a residential system. Then we'll talk about repairs and replacement. So minor repairs do not typically need a permit. So example, like if your pump goes bad, usually your maintainer or service provider would be able to replace that pump for you. You don't need to file a permit with the county or with the state to be able to just replace your existing pump, especially if you're replacing it with the same exact one that you already had. Large repairs, in the examples, if you have to replace a tank. So if you're doing a compliance inspection, they found a bad tank, they found a crack in the tank, it needs to be replaced, then you'll also have to usually get a permit to be able to replace that tank. Usually the counties, that's something they want to know. Most permits are issued by counties, but some townships and cities also take control of the subsurface sewage treatment systems in their area as well. Whenever you're going to do a full replacement of a system, a new soil treatment area is identified whenever possible versus building over the bigger one, or versus building over the existing one. And then I think I'm going to hand it back to Sarah for number 6.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. I think you just need to stop sharing and then I'll share again. So it's
Sure.
great having someone do this training with me who is out there every single day looking at these. So while I'm talking, if you have like very practical questions for Lucas, feel free to ask away. So I'm going to get to my favorite part of the presentation. And as one comment said, this may, looking at septic system pictures to some of you may be, I'll just use the word disgusting. To me, sounds funny. I love it, right? I love the idea that we can take dirty water and recycle it back into the environment. And that when it comes out at the end, it looks like water again. So, and I know that I'm weird, but that's okay. I'm willing to accept that. So what we're going to talk about now is things that you can do again to lengthen the life of your system. So it's protecting your investment. So you may not really care about your septic system from the way that I do, but I have yet to meet a person who wants to pay for a new septic system. So in interest of time, I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. But if you have questions, again, that's what the chat's for. So the first one is looking at what's in our drains. Oh, John Ernst.
Sarah, we don't have any audio on the video.
Oh, I don't know why that would be, Tammy, because it worked. I guess I did not personally test it. So I can't, I don't think I should troubleshoot that right now in interest of time. So the good thing is my next slide is going to cover all of this.
And your share stopped, Sarah. You might want to start that up again.
Okay. We had Lucas test his audio on the video and I did not. So anyway, so I will cover all of it in the slides. So, what that was really getting at is keeping an eye on your water usage. So listening for drips and leaks and fixing any problems. I don't know if you guys noticed earlier, but one of the slides had like how much water usage in the average home is just due to leaks. So if you have a leaky faucet or the toilet, right, that leaks, fix those. So when you're buying new appliances, make sure you're looking for those that offer water and energy efficient cycles. Never use your toilet or your septic system in general as a garbage can. We should be placing that waste in the garbage. Limit your use of harsh cleaners and sanitizers, and choosing products that are natural or biodegradable. So the slide set for this presentation is also in the Blue Sky, the class you registered for. So if you want to look up this website, it actually rates products in their their negative impact to the environment. So choosing products that get an A are better for your septic system. All right, so not overloading our commode. So that is our toilet. And if your toilet looks like this, it's time for a remodel, because are those older toilets, and this one looks like it's from the 70s, use 5 or more gallons every time you flush, where the new ones use 1.6 gallons or less. The other big problem with toilets certainly is those that do have that leak. So that leak results in slow amounts of water, but those slow amounts of water really do add up over time. I mentioned the toilet cleaners already. Many toilet cleaners are very hard on septic systems. We want to avoid the use of automatic sanitizers that cause sanitizers to be delivered to the septic system every time. Some people may think a toilet bowl that's blue is beautiful. It makes me cringe because I know every time I flush the toilet, I'm sending a sanitizer out there. So you're better off using a small amount. And what I generally use is like a little bit of cleanser if I have some buildup, but a lot of the buildup in your toilet bowl is just really taken off with a brush. And the big thing with the toilet is only human waste and toilet paper. No Kleenex, Q-tips, cigarettes, hair, you name it. None of that stuff should go in. And I can't help but notice your comment, Angela. So I grew up on a farm in rural Carver County, as someone else mentioned, and we used iron out growing up because we had iron in our water. And the problem of iron out is if, and I don't know about you, but I remember it, is that you don't want to breathe it or get it on your skin. And that is a great example of a cleaner that is not septic safe, that will kill bacteria. It's very caustic. So iron is a big problem. And if we have time, or we can chat about it later, as far as how to mitigate iron problems. But many of the chemicals that are marketed to remove iron are very hard on septic systems. So a few other things to help cut back on water usage: taking shorter showers versus baths. Some of those bathtubs now are giant. It can be 30, 40, 50 gallons. Choosing low flow fixtures, avoiding daily cleaners. There's shower cleaners, for instance. You spray your shower down every time because that is actually a sanitizer. Avoid the use of antibacterial soaps. Good old fashioned bar soap is your best option. You use the least amount of soap needed to actually get yourself clean. And that is generally true if you want to lengthen the life of your septic system. The less soap that's going out there, the better. So if you happen to have a clogged drain, and my favorite story about a clogged drain is I went on vacation and my husband's friend stayed at our house, and that's an important part of the story. Anyway, we come back from vacation and my kitchen sink is just, it will hardly run at all. So I reach out to him. I'm like, Nick, what did you do? What happened in our kitchen? And he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, I processed a deer while you're out of town, but I left you some venison in your freezer. And I was like, well, thanks. But then I had to take apart the drain, and that was not pleasant because it was a combination of hair and fat and oil. And I'll stop there. So that was something I could fix. I could take apart the drain. Sometimes it's something, if it's further down than underneath your trap, you may have to get a professional out, but it's much better to clean it physically than use a product out on the market. And there's many of them because the products in that generally will be harmful to your septic system. So I also recommend at your kitchen sink or any sink where you have the risk of solids going down that you have a really good strainer to help catch it. Same with your laundry. If your laundry water goes into a tub, there's a fair amount of just bigger lint that you can catch there, and they're really cheap at the hardware store. So when it comes to your washing machine, again, your washing machine is a huge water user in your home right after your toilet, and it's a big way to cut back on water usage. So the new front-loading washing machines or even efficient top loaders use so much less water. The other thing you really want to avoid is Saturday laundry day where you do all of your laundry for the week. It's much better if you can do a load or two a day and just spread that water out so you don't have this peak day where you're using so much water. Another thing to consider adding is a washing machine lint filter. Believe it or not, there's more lint that comes off in your washer than your dryer. We all have lint filters on our dryer, and most of us don't have it on our washer. So when you launder your clothes, all these fibers come off, and many of the fibers we're wearing now are synthetic. So if you want to try a really cheap option, just try putting a screen on your discharge line. I've even heard of people trying a pantyhose, and you'll be amazed what it catches. But there are also aftermarket lint filters that can be added. And I honestly believe someday some of our washing machines may actually have lint filters built into them again. I actually grew up with one that had one, but they're really hard to find now. So you want to limit your bleach. The recommendation here is less than 1 load per week. Do not use laundry sanitizers. So this was something that came out of COVID. There are now laundry detergents that are sanitizing, which is not needed. Limit the detergent to the minimal you need. Keep in mind that the companies selling you detergent want you to use as much as you want. And often, particularly with soft water, it really only takes a little bit to get your clothes clean. Be careful of cheap powdered products as they can contain clay. Clay does not settle out well in the septic tank and actually can cause large problems out in your soil treatment area. We do not recommend the use of liquid fabric softeners. It can affect the stratification, those layers in the septic tank. I have some of these balls like you see here on the right. They actually help in your dryer as well. They absorb some moisture so it can decrease your drying time. It helps, I don't know if any of you ever had it where like your bedding all gets balled up in one giant ball. It also helps with that. So it kind of naturally softens because it's bouncing around in there. So there's some other suggestions there, but those are my favorite. They do also sell plastic ones, much noisier in your dryer. So moving on to that sink, our recommendations in the kitchen are using full dishwashers. If you have a dishwasher, one of my pet peeves, I see some of my nieces and nephews who are literally washing their dishes in the sink and they're just running the water all the time. Like if you're going to hand wash, fill it up and just rinse what you need. Making sure you're choosing phosphorus or phosphate-free detergent, scraping your plates into the garbage, fixing leaks, making sure your fats and oils are not going down the drain. They can coagulate, cool off in your line and cause problems. Do not thaw your food under running water. That's been a practice that some commercial kitchens use, but you're better off either thawing them in your refrigerator or using the defrost in your microwave. If you have a garbage disposal or garbage grinder, in your home already, we would just recommend you limit how much you use it. When you put food in there that hasn't gone through our digestive system, it's much harder for those solids to be digested. For the most part, depending on your options as far as where your food waste should go, if you have an option for composting or if your municipality collects compost, great. There are a few, if you're home composting, sometimes fats and oils and animal-based products can be challenging to compost. So you just have to be careful with some of that. If you do have a garbage disposal, the code does require your tank be larger because we know you're going to accumulate more solids. So in your utility room, just make sure your sump pumps or tile lines do not drain into your septic system. That can be hundreds or thousands of gallons at rainfall events that should never enter your system. Never run water if you're worried about freezing. That's something I hear more commonly in the South, where people will run their water to keep their water lines from freezing. And if you have furnace condensate, dehumidifiers, water softeners, iron filters, are particularly home RO systems or point of entry systems, those again are sources that have the risk of overloading your septic system or causing other problems. So hazardous waste should never go into a septic system. So examples here are paints, adhesive, aerosols, cleaners, drain cleaners, antifreezers. You can read the rest. So the picture on the right is actually of a tank that had paint, from a painting within the home. And this is the pump tank. This isn't the septic tank. So you can just imagine how much paint may be present in there. So, and paint will just kind of coat your soil and can really ruin a septic system. So there are options for hazardous waste collection, medicine drop-off sites. There is a place to take all of that where they will be properly dealt with. So we're going to move on to number 7. What can you do outside your home? So the picture on the right here shows an inspection port, or a clean out actually, which is kind of different. So some of us have larger inspection ports that are used to more measure ponding within the system. The pipe you see here was actually tied to a line. So every time the pump turns on, it actually surfaces in the yard. It's like you have your own little Old Faithful of sewage, which nobody wants. So we're going to discuss how to now protect your drain field. So outside your home, you want to assure no treated water from hot tubs or pools enters the system. This picture shows an example of not what to do. So now we have a clean water source running directly over their septic tank, which increases the likelihood of infiltration. So we want to route our roof drains away. And as was discussed earlier, we never want to park vehicles over the top of the system. We're going to compact the soil, which reduces oxygen transfer to the system and the pores that water can move through. So this next one may be hard for some people, but we really do not want to irrigate or fertilize over our septic system. There's just a lot of water and nutrients there, and we don't want to add extra. A riding lawnmower is the heaviest thing that should go over the top of your septic system, and I would say a small lawnmower. Do not grade or add soil without talking to an installer or your permit authority. There's the risk of additional soil depth and the methods sometimes used to spread that can damage the soil treatment area. So some do's and don'ts of vegetation. We do want to have a good vegetative cover over the top of systems. In general, we want to plant things that can handle getting dry. For instance, grass in the middle of a dry summer, it looks brown and awful. The good news is we get a little rain, it comes back to life. That's the kind of vegetation we want. Trees and shrubs are fine to plant around your system, but you don't want to have them too close. And dwarf is the key term. So planting some of the small, more ornamental trees closer to your septic system is a better idea. We do not want to have edible plants such as vegetables and herbs. Vegetable gardens are not good vegetative cover going into winter. Most of them are bare. Do never place anything with a woody stalk over the top of your system. Do not let, if you let grass grow, sometimes you start to see scrub show up that will turn into trees and other woody things, like even like not a clematis, wisteria know if any of you have ever had one of those. It has this incredibly invasive, woody vine that can really cause problems. You never want to place plastic landscaping sheets over the soil treatment area because they will limit oxygen transfer into the system. So there are setbacks when we put in a brand new system, but keep in mind that it's good to keep these things in mind if you are planning on improvements. Let's say you want to put in a retaining wall, a hot tub, a pool. There is a point in time where there may need to be work done on that system. So you want to, I would always say, stay at least 10 feet away. And anytime that there's going to be people working on that site, your best option is to fence it off so they won't traffic over it. It's just too easy sometimes to drive over it. Keep in mind if you put fences or gates up that someone is going to have to get to particularly your septic tank to maintain it in the future, and that can cause problems. All right, so with that, we're going to move to freezing, and I'm going to hand this back to Lucas because he deals a lot. He has a lot of firsthand experience dealing with systems that have froze.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Perfect. So yeah, we're going to chat about septic tanks and freezing issues with them. So when a septic system freezes, a main thing you want to do is figure out what caused it to freeze. So was it a lack of cover? Was it compaction? Was it a regular system use? Were you on vacation and you have a high efficiency furnace and it was kind of just dripping in the line and building up that wall and freezing? Do you have plumbing leaking, a dripping faucet? When you have the gravity collection line leaving your house, as soon as it leaves the footings of your house, that pipe is super, super cold. It doesn't have the radiant heat from your house to keep the water from freezing. So I've seen it a ton of times where you have the high efficiency furnace or you have a leaky faucet, and then literally right outside the foundation of your house will just be an ice wall of where that water just builds up and builds up over, a couple of days, and then there's no more water getting out after that. Um, Cold air too, if you have a clean out outside your house and that cap is broken or not there, letting a bunch of cold air just getting right into the line, that's just going to help that water freeze really fast. Another big thing too is if there's a sag in the line, so if there's a belly somewhere that's going to hold water, eventually that can start to build up as well and then kind of keep that it's going to eventually block off completely and then obviously keep the water from flowing and getting to the septic tank or getting out to the drain field or whatever we want. Last year we had a ton of these issues with the light amount of snow we had with and then the extreme colds that we had. It's even possible to have them on a force main too. So again, if there's a sag in that line is the most common thing with a force main. And that pump turns on every time that water comes back and it's supposed to drain back into your tank. It'll just slowly build up and build up until it's completely blocking it off, and then your pump's not able to get any water out to your drain field, and you're going to be using it as a holding tank most likely because something like that's just going to keep freezing. Remedies for it, again, when you're in the middle of winter, um, sometimes it's fairly difficult to get a fix. Sometimes, people have utilized heat tape or thawing the ground and insulating. But usually once you're diving into that issue, or okay, I'm gonna go back a little bit. If it's like a gravity collection line coming from a house and you were on vacation and weren't using any water and your furnace or leaky faucet kind of blocked off the pipe, that's something that you're usually able to fix. If it's like a force main issue, once it's winter and it's cold, that's a lot more difficult to actually then come back from. So the remedies, you want to figure out why and where, and you want to fix it. Um, so basically, that's going to be if there is a sag in the pipe, fixing that collection line so that it's just smooth flowing all the way to the septic tank, or same thing in the force main, insulating it. If you know it's a common issue and that you've now had, even just throwing down straw, hay, letting the grass grow around where that line is located or where the drain field's located. Anything that's going to help insulate that ground, keep some of the heat in. Even if you do have a sag in the line and you've had some freezing issues in the past, running some hot water doing a load of dishes or using the hot water in the laundry machine, running the tub with some hot water. All that stuff is going to help kind of clean and scour that ice out of the pipe as it's building up in there. Um, like I talked about a little bit, if it's a force main that's freezing, so the pump that would be pumping to your drain field, if happens in the middle of the winter, it's very possible that you're going to end up using your tank as a holding tank until springtime comes and you're able to do a more permanent fixes, whether that's replacing that pipe or insulating that pipe. Freezing prevention techniques. So this is going to be for new and existing systems. So I kind of already touched a little bit on them. But adding mulch, insulating blankets over areas of concern. So, if there's a main area that whoever you have come out to come thaw your line or clear the blockage in your line, usually they can locate and tell you in a fairly good vicinity of where this issue is. So if you can throw some extra insulation over that area, that's going to help keep some of that heat in the ground around that. You let the lawn get a little bit longer. Maybe you don't cut it over the tank or you don't cut it over the drain or where that line runs. Using water normally. So, just making sure that people are there. There's water running down the pipe. That's going to help scour that ice out of the pipe. If you are going away for an extended period, if you're going on vacation for a week, maybe you can, I know on the high efficiency furnaces, some people are able to get like a little basin with a pump that pumps the water into the lines. Then instead of just a slow, steady drip, it actually is going to force that water through and not give it time to freeze, or at least that's the goal, is to not give it time to be able to freeze and build a wall up in that pipe. Um, Obviously, fixing the leaky fixtures, those are a major issue. If that is something where, obviously the best thing to do is to fix it because it's not good for your septic system, even if it is in the summertime. But let's say if you know one, you didn't have time to fix it, you're going on vacation, maybe you can shut the water off in your house when you're gone so that that's not just having that slow, steady drip. Don't compact on the system. So especially with gravity collection lines, if sometimes we see them where they run underneath the driveways, which obviously makes it more difficult. But, if you can avoid plowing that part or you can avoid driving over that part, the more that you drive a vehicle over an area where there's going to be a sewer line running, it's just going to drive that frost deeper and deeper every time. And it's just going to make the freezing issue worse and worse. And then don't let cold air enter the system. So again, if you're making sure the lids to your tank are properly secured, they're in good condition. A lid a lid over the inlet specifically of a tank, so the pipe that's coming from the house into the septic tank, if that lid has a big crack in it or is missing a big chunk or the riser's missing a big chunk, that's going to let a lot of cold air just right down into your septic tank and could absolutely cause some issues with it freezing right there in the beginning of the septic tank. And then kind of the same thing as before, if you do have any surfacing sewage, you want to make sure that you call someone right away. I'd say that in the wintertime, the most common thing is there is a frozen line. Your alarm may not work, you may not know about it, and then suddenly, why is there an ice rink above where my septic tank is? Or why is there an ice rink around the edge of my drain field? Well, yeah, might be something frozen in your drain field that then causes all that water just to kind of leak out down the sides, and then now there's a bunch of ice around. So if you notice anything like that, it's usually a little bit discolored. It usually is fairly obvious. It's something you want to contact someone about right away. And then seasonality issues. So it's better to pump the tanks in the late spring to early fall. The main reason for that is you want to keep some of that like heat of the water, if you have to pump it, it is what it is. It's okay to do. But if you're able to avoid it, I would say it's absolutely better to. Again, the ground's super cold around the tank. As soon as you pump it and get that radiant heat of the water out, it's a lot harder to build that back up because after you pump out a septic tank, if it's 1,000-gallon septic tanks, most people that's going to take a while to fill back up. And so it's just going to give that water more time to cool down. If you have very low use in the winter, maybe you can use it as a holding tank. If you go away for a couple months, if you're a snowbird, or if it's just a cabin and you only go up there a couple times, maybe it would make more sense just to get the tank pumped in the fall time, and you know you're not going to fill the tank back up, and so you don't even have to worry about it. Um, Leaving the furnace on, it's going to help keeping with some of the heat in the house and everything. But with the high efficiency furnaces, and I'd say a lot of the houses, at least in our area, definitely have them nowadays. They definitely create a lot of issues too, because basically they have the condensate drip going out of them fairly constantly, and it's those slow, steady drips that really cause the most issues with freezing in pipes because they just build up and people don't notice them. And pretty much as soon as you don't use water for a couple days, that's when they really show themselves. And then you can see the section on the U of M website on good seasonal care. And then number 9, we're going to hand it back to Sarah now. Thank you.
All right, and I know we're running out of time here, so the good news is there's only a few slides left, and this odor issue is pretty unique. I don't hear a lot of people having this problem, but this slide really sums up a lot of the issues I see, and I just want to let you all know that most septic tanks in particular vent back through the plumbing stack. So a lot of times when people experience odor, it's because that plumbing stack is not getting adequately vented away from the house. That is the most common issue that I run into when people smell or have odors related to their septic system. So every septic system makes odorous gases. So a lot of the times when people have this complaint, it's because they got a new system, which I always think is funny because they spent a whole bunch of money and now they can smell their septic system. And it's because the old system wasn't tight. So it was just kind of venting out in the soil or out through pipes that leaked. With new systems, now we make them tight. And so the venting has to go as designed back through the plumbing stack. So if you do smell septic odors in your home, one of the most common reason is a dry trap. So we have traps throughout our house, like in the image shown on the right. The purpose of the trap is to hold water in it so gases can't come back. So if you smell odors somewhere, look for dry traps. I once was dealt with a house where the trap had been carpeted over with. That was a challenging one. So otherwise, you also want to make sure that your plumbing stack isn't frozen or clogged. So if you happen to have gurgling drains, that's an indication sometimes that you're not venting appropriately. So if you happen to smell odors out by your septic tank, make sure your lids are secure. Covering it with a little bit of mulch would be better. Just keep in mind they're at grade for a reason. You see here on the image, they're adding a seal to a riser to help prevent gases from escaping out. It may be that the tank needs maintenance. It may be that the tank is upset, or other reasons why you might smell it. Where I commonly more see it is out by a pump tank. So a pump tank has an electrical line that's going into the tank. You can maybe kind of see it in the picture there, but where that is going into the tank can sometimes create a location for gases to escape. If you're smelling your soil treatment area, it probably more tells you could have a vent open, you could be leaking sewage, and then you're actually smelling wastewater. So the image I showed you before can also describe how roof can get caught under overhangs. They do make filters you can put on your vents on your roof. The downside is these will collect condensate and freeze in the winter. So they actually have to be removed. So they do not meet Minnesota's plumbing code for those reasons. So if you're willing to get up on your roof, these are a good option. Otherwise, they're not. Then sometimes extending your stack is a better solution. So the last topic isn't about septics, it's about wells. And I saw someone ask a great question about this. So we've been talking about how important it is to manage your septic system. Most of you are also managing your own drinking water supply. And that means you should be testing your well. And this shows an ideal well. This may not be the one in your backyard, but modern wells are designed to have a wellhead above the ground surface, should have a unique well tag identifying it, and a weatherproof cap and rubber gasket. That being said, everyone should be testing their well. This is, again, the recommended testing from MDH is coliform bacteria, which would be the indication of human excrement or animal excrement, which I don't want to drink, and I doubt any of you do either. Nitrate, as I mentioned, has a public health risk limit of 10. And then arsenic and lead are a one-time test, and then manganese in particular before a baby's going to drink that water. So if you've never had your well tested, get it tested. I saw Carver County mention they have well test kits, so reach out and see. Otherwise, there's probably a local lab who will do that for you. So what I want you to hopefully take away from today is having a good septic system protects public health and the environment. Consider staggering out your water usage. Think about the cleaners and the products you're using. Again, our septic systems are designed to handle minimal amounts of medicine, cleaners, all of those things, but sometimes minimal to me and minimal to you are different. So just be really conscientious. And it's just, I would say it's just better for that stuff to not be out in the environment in general. Sometimes I think we've moved towards more chemical is better in our when it comes to cleaning, and that's not true. That's not always true. Never think about your septic system as a garbage can, and just really think about your vegetation, obstructions, and traffic. Try to protect that investment in your backyard. You know, someone asked about what a new septic system costs. And I mean, I've heard anywhere from 10 to 50,000, and that's a huge range, being common numbers. So the number, again, I can't say for anyone's backyard, but it's a lot of money. It's not a couple $100s. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And we all want these things like, you know, to last as long as possible. So do everything you can to limit the impact. It's kind of like driving your car. You know, the more you drive it, you're impacting the longevity, but you also got to take care of it. And septic systems are the same. So there's a lot of resources here. The bottom one, for instance, is another course you could take on your own that covers some of the similar information. We will post, again, this webinar on the website. So for those of you who had issues, we'll reach out and make sure that you have that. Or if you know others who weren't able to join us tonight, this is a free course we're offering to anyone who wants the information. So I do have my contact information. I think many of you heard from Mawa through registering. So we are going to stick around and answer any remaining questions. I again want to thank the PCA in particular for helping answering questions. I don't know about the Q&A. I did want to record the Q&A tonight. We like to see what questions we were asking to think about. Do we need to update the materials for next year? We generally do not publish that. So if there's specific questions and answers you were looking for, Lori, I'd say reach out to either Mala or myself. We're happy to have ongoing conversations if you guys have questions. So thanks, Ryan. I appreciate your comment. Yeah, I'm all for the less we put out in the environment. It's just things tend to persist. It's not as easy as using something and it's gone. Many of these, again, emerging contaminants, we probably all heard about PFAS now. No one thought the first time they used a Teflon pan, we'd be talking about PFAS today, or forever chemicals, which are even more challenging than some of the CECs we discussed tonight. So if there's nothing else, have a great night. Or as I said, those of us who have been speaking or answering questions will stick around. Our website, again, has a great resource. Or if you're looking for more information, we'll be happy to connect you to many of the resources that are out there.
Oh, I was just gonna go. Oh, let me see. I was gonna go to that well testing slide.
We see your Zoom web browser. Oh, you got it.
Yep. Yeah, so whoever's asking that question, anonymous person. So these again are the recommended testing by MDH. And if you Google MDH and well testing, more information will come up. But I went over this very quickly, but coliform bacteria is just the indicator that there is a source of coliform bacteria, which is either human or animal in nature, but you never want to have coliforms in your well. Nitrate has that public health risk limit of 10 milligrams per liter. So those are the two most common that people will test on a regular basis. But arsenic and lead can, arsenic is a naturally, for the most part, naturally occurring contaminant that is in some people's drinking water. It can come from some manufacturing processes. So it's good to test that. And lead would come from typically your water lines, if you have older water supply lines. And manganese can be a risk if babies are drinking that water, for instance, through formula. And again, as this says at the bottom, if you have kids in your home, it's even more important. But it's very important to note that if you live in a city, your water is being regularly tested by your municipality. If you live rural and you don't have rural water, a few of you could, but most of us don't, you are managing your water system, and testing your well to me is super important. And that person who asked that question is not unique. I've done this course many times and I ask people how many people have tested their well, and very few people raise their hand. So please get your well tested. Know that the water you're drinking and putting into your body every day is safe. All right. Well, the last thing I'm going to do here, for those of you who are sticking around again, is just show my email. So if you have any other questions, please reach out. And if I can't answer it, I'll find someone who can. I again want to thank Lucas for presenting tonight and the MPCA for coming here on a Tuesday night. So thanks again. Have a great evening and have a great night.